In this lecture, we're going to be talking about a few concepts that are incredibly important to CSS. That's going to be inheritance, specificity, and the cascade. So a lot of CSS courses out there don't really go into detail, but it is important that you understand this, especially if you want to have a full grasp of how everything in CSS is working together. And if you want to be a really good front-end programmer, these are the things that you need to know. So we're going to start by talking about inheritance. Let's go back into the brackets code editor here. And let's erase all of the content that we have thus far. That way we'll have nothing but our body text. And I'm going to simply insert a list. So let's do an unordered list. And we're going to insert a few list items. Let's do item 1. And then I'm going to simply copy this and paste it a few times. So we'll paste that 5 times and we'll just rename these 5. Perfect. So now we can refresh our page over here, and we're just going to have a very basic list. Let's head back over to our style sheet, style.css. Let's get rid of our styles that we've made this far. And let's simply style our list with a color. So what we're going to do is we are going to select the selector of our element, which is UL. That's how we can style this. Do our curly brackets. And let's just give this a color. And for the color, let's use red. Now remember, I said we're not going to be using actual names for colors, but when it comes to teaching and it comes to just randomly off the top of my head coming up with a color, I am going to use these. So I'm not going to look up the RGB or the hex or the HSL value for red. And what we're going to do is we'll save that. We'll refresh over here. What we're going to see is all of these items here, the entire list, the color changed to red because, well, we told it to. Now let's pop back over to our HTML, because what I want you to notice is we are styling this UL item here, which is an HTML element. And within this element, we have other elements. We actually have 5 list items, which itself is an element. And the way you can think about this relationship is that the UL is the parent element, and the LI, because it is inside of it, right? Because it's in between the closing tag and the opening tag, this is going to be the child element. So if we go back to our style.css, I'm going to add a LI style this time. And we're going to give this a color, but we're going to make it blue. And I'm going to close that off with a semicolon. And if we save and refresh that, well, guess what's going to happen? Every single one of these list items are going to change to blue. But right now, what's happening is this entire list is being told, hey, you need to be red. That's the first thing it's hearing. And then secondly, what it's hearing is, okay, well, according to something more specific, according to the child, what's closer to the source for each one of these items, you need to be blue. So all in all, the child element is actually overriding this element. And we can even take that a step further. If we go back and we look at the overall structure here, inside of our body, we have our UL. So theoretically, right, the UL is a child as well, and it's a child of the parent element body because it's inside of it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually change the style of the UL and the LI by simply getting rid of them. So I'm going to delete just the color here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my body selector, and let's give this a color. And we're going to give this a color of, let's do aqua. So if we save this, what we should see is all of these items are going to turn aqua. Yep, there we go. And the reason being is if we tell the body that we want the color to be aqua, everything inside of the body here is going to be aqua unless we specify exactly what we want that to be. So if we actually turn the UL on here, again, and we may want to make this red, and we save that, red's going to override that. And again, if we turn the color from LI blue on, that's going to override that as well. So we actually have a hierarchy here. And if you think about the actual item here, item number 5, the same as all the others, it's actually being applied a blue color, it's being told red, and it's being told aqua. So if we right click and we inspect this item here, and we look at, let's make this larger, and we look at it down here, we can hover over each individual item, but I'm going to start by hovering over the body. We can see this color here, and it's specified as aqua. And if we hover over the UL here, it's going to select all of those, and we see that color red that we selected. And lastly, I'm going to select any one of these individual list items. And as we scroll down here, we see the blue LI color being established. We see the UL color here also, red, and we'll notice that it's actually crossed out. And if we scroll down, we can also see it's inheriting this color as well, body. You'll notice it says inherited from, but this is crossed out as well. That's because the child element, this last one here for the LI, that is the element that's going to show up every time, which is a great segue into the next topic, which is called specificity. Now, in CSS, when there are 2 or more conflicting CSS rules, similar to what we have going here, where we have multiple colors being applied here, the browser is going to follow very specific rules to determine which of those styles is more specific, and therefore that style is going to win out. Currently, because we're seeing these list items as blue, it's clear that the LI item here is winning out, meaning it's more specific to the browser than the UL item, or even than the body item, which really makes sense. And we can look at the specificity hierarchy by really looking at individual items. Now, the actual specificity is calculated based on numbers. And if we go back, let's go back into brackets really quickly. And I'm just going to, I'll write these in comments here. Let's hide this. Let's actually bring this down below. So let's go ahead and let's write the hierarchy here. So basically, do you remember earlier when we created an inline style? I said we're never going to be using inline styles. Well, when we create an inline style, that's going to have the highest priority. That's going to be the very most specific that our CSS or our browser is going to see. And therefore, that's going to equal a value of 1,000. Now, this isn't important. You do not have to memorize these numbers at all. Just understanding how specificity works is good enough, but I do think it's important for you to understand that this is completely mathematical and understand the hierarchy here. So an inline style, and we can toggle back to index.html, we can actually create that here. So what I can do is I'm going to do an li style, and I'm going to give this a color of purple. Okay, we'll do purple, and we'll refresh here. So because we applied that style to the 5th item here, and by the way, we know that's the most specific style, it's actually going to override the LI style, and it's going to win. If we keep going down the list, we next want to take a look at IDs. So more specific than a actual HTML element, or even more specific than a class, is going to be an ID. And an ID is always going to receive a value of 101. Now this is actually only going to be 100, but it's 100 plus 1 because it's actually getting a value of 1 from the element that it is an ID for. And I'll explain what I mean by there. Next, we have class, and a class is only going to be equal to 10, or 11 if we add the element that it's a class for, so 10 plus 1. And lastly, just a specific element, so body, UL, LI, all of these, right? So just a specific element, those are going to have a specificity of 1. So like I said, it's not important that you understand the math behind this or really need to even memorize this, but it is important that if we go to our index and let's create, so we have an inline style here, let's create a LI class here for item 1, and let's give this a class of, I'm a class, just because I can't think of anything. And what we're going to do is we'll save that. We'll go back to our style sheet, and we're going to create a class here. So it's going to be period, I'm a class. Now that we've selected that, we can give it a color, and let's give this a color of red. Actually, because we're already using UL as the color of red, let's make this chartreuse, which is going to be this lime green. So if we save this, item number 1 is now showing up as green, right? So it's overriding the actual element style for LI, which is blue, because a class, if we specify a class is way more specific than an actual element. If we think about the element, it's only getting a value of 1, but this class here, this is getting a value of 11. If we take that a step further and we were to give the class here, and we can actually do this in the same one. So I'm going to give, it's got a class of I'm a class, and I'm going to apply that to another one as well. So if we copy this and we apply that to item 2, but we add an ID to this first one as well, and we call this special. We save it. I'm going to go over to style, and I'm going to add using a pound sign this time, we're going to type in our ID, and we're going to give this a color. And let's do something like something that's going to stand out. Let's do crimson. And let's refresh. Okay, so let's take a look at what exactly is happening here. So when we look at all of these items, let's try to figure out where they are actually being styled from. And the first item here is red, right? So we know that this is inheriting from the UL item. Why? Because that's the most specific item for this LI item. It doesn't have a class. Oops, let me go. Oh, that's crimson, sorry. So this is that crimson color. It's not actually red. I probably should have done a better job picking colors. So basically what's happening here is this is crimson because it's inheriting from this ID. This ID is more specific than this class here. This class is more specific than this UL. This UL is more specific than this body, and this body is very, very general. It applies to everything inside of it, not very specific at all. Moving down the list, if we look at item number 2, it has a class. It doesn't have this ID, so it's going to follow the style of the class. Why? Because that class is more specific than the LI item. The LI item is more specific than the UL. And that continues on. Now, looking at this last item here, item number 5, it's got this purple color. So instead of following any of these others, it's going to be the most specific. The browser is going to place the most emphasis on this. And if we go back into Chrome, we can see all of this taking place. We see our body here, and it's got a color of aqua, right? And if we double click inside our UL, we have our color of red, and we can see all these items. I'm going to go down to the inline style one here where we selected it as purple, and we see all the styles that it's overriding. We have body, we have our UL color, we have our LI color. None of those are going to win out. What's going to win out is this purple, right? So that's a quick rundown of specificity. Again, you don't have to understand how it's calculated, but you should understand exactly how it works. So basically, up until this point, we understand that inheritance plays a role, and how specific we're being plays a role in really determining which CSS styles are going to be applied. And all of this continues to actually get more complicated. We could have multiple style sheets, and we need to figure out which one of those actual style sheets applies and things like that. But understanding that there is a hierarchy for this, and the fact that there is a cascading order is exactly why we have the term the cascade or cascading. Literally, CSS means cascading style sheets. So you can always think about the rule used is chosen by the cascade down from more general rules always to more specific rules, right? The more specific rules are always going to be chosen when it comes to cascading.